In 1568, in a dungeon beneath Toledo's cathedral, inquisitors strapped a woman named Elvira del Campo to a wooden chair. They inserted a cold metal device into her mouth, a segmented pear that could expand with the turn of a screw. 1 click, 2 clicks, 3, her jaw stretched beyond breaking. But here's the twisted genius. When they released her 6 hours later, there were no visible marks, no bruises, no blood, just a woman who would never speak clearly again. And a confession the church could call voluntary. But that's not even the worst part. What I'm about to show you isn't just about medieval torture. It's about a systematic, 356-year campaign that specifically targeted women, and the 3 reasons why will make you see modern politics in a completely different light. By the end of this video, you'll understand why historians actively tried to bury this story and why 70% of Inquisition victims were female. That's not a coincidence. Here's what you're about to discover. First, the brutal economic scheme that made wealthy widows the Holy Office's favorite targets. Second, the torture devices designed specifically for female bodies that the church erased from official records. And third, how these invisible tortures let the Inquisition maintain its holy reputation while destroying entire bloodlines. Don't click away, because in the next 8 minutes, you're going to recognize these patterns in today's world. And that recognition, it might just save lives. Before we go deeper, I need to tell you something. Only 12% of you watching are subscribed. If this story shocks you, if it makes you angry, if it makes you think, hit that subscribe button. Because next week, I'm exposing the medieval abortion underground that the church spent centuries trying to erase. Now, let's talk about why women became targets. Spain, 1478. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella established the Spanish Inquisition. You've been told it was about hunting heretics and converting Jews. That's the cover story. The real mission: control and profit, and women, especially women with power, wealth, or knowledge, were the perfect victims. Here are the numbers historians don't advertise. According to comprehensive studies by Gustav Henningsen and James Contreras analyzing 44,000 Inquisition trials, between 60 and 70% of the accused were women. Think about that. In a society where men held the property, the political power, and the religious authority, women somehow represented the majority of spiritual threats. That doesn't add up, unless you understand what was really happening. The Spanish Inquisition pioneered something insidious: silent torture. While men accused of heresy faced the rack, a device that visibly dislocated shoulders and hips, or the strappado, which left obvious joint damage, women experienced something different. Their tortures were engineered with 3 specific design goals. Goal 1, leave minimal visible evidence. Bruises that faded within weeks. Internal damage that couldn't be seen. Psychological trauma that couldn't be measured. Goal 2, target reproductive organs. Not just to cause pain, but to destroy fertility, sexuality, and the physical capacity for motherhood. Goal 3, destroy credibility rather than merely extract confession. Make women appear hysterical, delusional, inherently untrustworthy. Why this matters right now, what you're about to learn isn't just history, it's a blueprint, a pattern for how authoritarian systems control women's bodies, wealth, and autonomy while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. Once you see this pattern, you'll recognize it everywhere. But here's the question nobody asks: why women? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about religion. It's not about superstition. It's about 3 calculated strategies that made women the most profitable, controllable targets in Spanish history. Let me show you the first one. And I'm warning you now, once you understand the economic incentive, everything else makes horrifying sense. Imagine you're a widow in 1485 Toledo. Your husband dies, and suddenly, you're one of the wealthiest women in the city. You inherit his merchant business, 3 properties in the Jewish quarter, and enough gold to live independently for the rest of your life. You've just become dangerous. Here's the pattern that appears in 40% of female Inquisition cases: wealthy widows and single women with property. This isn't speculation. The Archivo Histórico Nacional, Spain's National Historical Archive, contains thousands of property seizure records. And when historians cross-referenced those seizures with accusation dates, they found something chilling. The spikes match perfectly. Let me walk you through exactly how this worked. Step 1. Woman inherits estate. She's now visible, vulnerable, and valuable. Step 2. Anonymous denunciation. Maybe a business rival, maybe a nephew who wants his inheritance back, maybe just a neighbor who covets her land. The Inquisition accepted anonymous accusations, no evidence required. Step 3. Arrest and trial. The burden of proof is reversed. She must prove her innocence. And here's where the silent torture becomes critical. Step 4. Confession under torture. But and this is key, torture that leaves no permanent visible marks. Step 5. Property confiscated. 1/3 goes to the crown, 1/3 goes to the church, 1/3 funds the Inquisition itself. Everyone profits except the woman. Let me tell you about Maria Gonzalez. In 1485, this wealthy Toledo widow was accused of Judaizing, secretly practicing Jewish rituals. The evidence, an anonymous letter. She was arrested, and inquisitors used a device called the spider on her breasts, a metal claw heated red-hot, designed to tear tissue without causing immediately visible damage from the outside. After 6 hours, Maria confessed to everything, meeting with demons, desecrating the Eucharist, teaching her daughters Jewish prayers. None of it was true. All of it was legally sufficient. Her property seized within a week, her daughters stripped of their inheritance and marriage prospects, the church wealthier by exactly 3,000 ducats. And here's the genius of silent torture. By the time trial records became public documents 3 months later, Maria's bruises had healed. The internal damage wasn't visible. The confession appeared voluntary. The church maintained its reputation for mercy while systematically looting female wealth. But you know what? The economic motive was just the surface. The real reason women were targeted goes so much deeper than money. Because the Inquisition wasn't just stealing property, they were stealing something far more valuable. The second strategy targeted the one form of power women could never fully surrender. And when you understand what that was, the cruelty makes perfect, calculated sense. Here's a statistic that should make your blood run cold. 60% of accusations against women involved charges related to sexuality, midwifery, or so-called love magic. Not heresy, not religious deviation, female knowledge and female bodies. Why? Because midwives controlled something the church desperately wanted to monopolize, the power over life and death. Think about what a medieval midwife represented. She made medical decisions without consulting priests or male physicians. She held knowledge passed down mother to daughter for generations, knowledge about contraception, abortion, pain management during childbirth. She existed entirely outside male institutional authority. She was, in every sense, ungovernable. So the Inquisition created a category of torture specifically designed to destroy that power, not just to inflict pain, to target the very organs that made women dangerous. Let me describe 3 devices you won't find in most history books because they're too uncomfortable to acknowledge. First, vaginal pairs, metal devices shaped like bulbs, inserted and then expanded using screws. They caused internal tearing, infection, and often permanent damage to reproductive organs. The goal wasn't confession, it was sterilization. Second, breast rippers, 4-pronged claws, sometimes heated, designed to tear breast tissue. The external wounds healed, but the internal damage often made nursing impossible. Again, not about confession, about destroying maternal capacity. Third, water torture applied specifically to the lower abdomen. Women were forced to drink massive quantities of water while pressure was applied to their bladders and wombs. Ruptured organs were common, visible evidence, almost none. These techniques weren't invented randomly. They appear in the Directorium Inquisitorum, the Inquisitor's manual written by Nicolau Eymerich in 1376. Section 14 explicitly details gendered torture applications. The Church didn't just allow this. They systematized it. Let me tell you about Isabel de la Cruz. In 1529, Isabel worked as a midwife in Guadeloupe. When a noblewoman suffered a stillbirth, Isabel became the scapegoat. The accusation, demonic pacts that caused infant deaths. Under torture with the vaginal pair, Isabel confessed to flying to Sabbaths, copulating with demons, and using potions to murder babies in the womb. She was burned alive. But here's what's even more horrifying. After her execution, Guadeloupe's maternal mortality rate tripled. Why? Because the remaining midwives fled or went into hiding. The medical knowledge disappeared. Women and infants died as a direct result. The Inquisition didn't just target individual women. They targeted female knowledge itself. They created a medical dark age that lasted for generations, but that's nothing compared to what comes next, because the economic theft and reproductive control were brutal. But the third strategy was pure psychological warfare. I know this is getting dark. But if you're still watching, you're clearly as fascinated by history's brutal truths as I am. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm revealing the medieval abortion underground and the secret network of women who kept that knowledge alive despite the Inquisition's best efforts. Now, let me show you the most psychologically devastating weapon the Church ever created. Imagine you're tortured until you confess to flying on broomsticks, to having sex with demons, to eating unbaptized babies, impossible things, insane things, and then after you confess, the Inquisitors point to your confession as proof that women are naturally deceptive, hysterical, and unreliable. This is gaslighting as institutional policy, and it required torture devices that could break a woman's mind while leaving her body intact enough to appear before the court. Device 1: tongue clamps. Iron restraints that immobilized the tongue during trial, preventing women from speaking in their own defense. When they were finally allowed to speak, the damage often made their speech slurred or unclear, making them appear drunk or possessed. Device 2: the ducking stool. Repeated submersion in water until near drowning, then revival. No bruises, no broken bones, just trauma. And when women recanted their confessions afterward, pointing to the torture, the court records would show only that she had changed her story, proof of female deceitfulness. Device 3: sleep deprivation in isolation cells. Women were kept awake for 72 hours or more before trial. When they appeared before judges, they seemed confused, paranoid, irrational. Exactly how a witch was supposed to behave. Let me tell you what happened to Elvira del Campo, the woman from the beginning of this video. In 1568, Elvira was accused of not eating pork. That's it. That's the evidence. Inquisitors arrested her and subjected her to the toca, water torture, combined with the oral pear. For 6 hours, she was drowned repeatedly while her jaw was forced open beyond breaking. She confessed. Of course she confessed. Then the next day she recanted, said the confession was forced, so they tortured her again. For 8 hours this time, she confessed again. This time the confession stuck. The trial records, which you can still read today in Toledo's archives, describe her confession as freely given without coercion. The judges noted that she had recanted once, but upon reflection and prayer, returned to the truth. The cruelty isn't just in the torture, it's in the documentation. The official record makes Elvira look unstable, first confessing, then denying, then confessing again. It makes the Inquisitors look patient and merciful. And it creates a legal precedent. Women's testimony is inherently unreliable. But here's what nobody tells you, and this is where it gets truly sinister. The Inquisition kept immaculate records, and modern historians analyzing those records noticed something chilling. Educated women were disproportionately targeted. Women who could read Latin, women who owned books, women who could potentially document what was being done to them. The silent tortures weren't just about hiding evidence from the public. They were about destroying the credibility of the witnesses before they could ever testify. But here's what nobody tells you. This wasn't just about controlling individual women. The ultimate goal was even darker, and it affected generations that hadn't even been born yet. What I'm about to show you is the most disturbing discovery modern historians have made. And it explains why Spain's recovery took centuries longer than the rest of Europe. In the 1990s, a team of Spanish historians did something unprecedented. They traced the family lines of Inquisition victims forward through time, following daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters. What they found was a pattern so disturbing, it changed our understanding of what the Inquisition actually was. Women descended from accused witches had 85% lower literacy rates, marriage rates, and property ownership compared to their peers, even 3 generations later. Let that sink in. The torture of one woman in 1520 statistically determined whether her great-granddaughter in 1620 could read. This wasn't collateral damage. This was the design. Here's the mechanism: torture a mother, force a public confession. The family name is now associated with heresy. The daughters become unmarriageable, no respectable family will take them. They can't inherit property because tainted family lines lose legal rights. They can't enter convents because the church rejects them. They become servants, prostitutes, or beggars, and because the torture was silent, the family couldn't prove abuse, couldn't seek justice, couldn't even tell the story without seeming to defend heresy. The genius was in the invisibility. Visible torture creates martyrs. Silent torture creates shame. Let me give you the scale of this destruction. Estimated 150,000 women were accused in Spain alone between 1478 and 1834. If each woman had, on average, 2 daughters who survived to adulthood, and those daughters had daughters. You're looking at ripple effects that touched millions of female lives. Now here's where it gets truly dark. The Inquisition understood behavioral economics before the term existed. They weaponized fear. Women don't learn to read. Literacy was associated with heresy. Don't accumulate wealth. Wealth invited accusations. Don't practice medicine. Midwifery was suicidal. Don't live independently. Widows were targets. The historical consequences are measurable. Education collapse. Spanish female literacy in 1800 was approximately where French female literacy had been in 1600. They lost 200 years of progress. Medical knowledge loss. When midwives disappeared, maternal mortality spiked. Historians estimate thousands of excess maternal deaths directly attributable to midwife persecution. Economic devastation. Women's property ownership dropped from approximately 30% in the 1400s to less than 5% by the 1600s. That's a 25-point collapse in female economic power. And here's the thing that still haunts me. The Inquisition officially ended in 1834. But the social patterns, the fear of female education, the suspicion of women with property, the assumption that women's testimony was unreliable, those patterns persisted for another century. The torture devices were destroyed. The dungeons were closed. But the invisible damage, that lasted for generations. This is what silent violence does. It erases itself from history while its effects echo forward through time. So what do we do with this information? The Spanish Inquisition created a blueprint for authoritarian control of women through invisible violence and legal systems. They proved you don't need gas chambers or mass grave to destroy a population. You just need systems that operate quietly, that document themselves as legitimate, that make the victims appear complicit in their own destruction. And those patterns, they're not extinct. Right now, in countries around the world, women activists disappear into detention facilities where the torture leaves no marks, where confessions are extracted and presented as voluntary, where families are destroyed across generations through systematic economic and social exclusion. The lesson isn't that we live in the Spanish Inquisition. The lesson is this: when violence is invisible, history can be rewritten. Documentation matters. Witnessing matters. Believing women when they speak about systems designed to silence them, that matters most of all. So I want you to think about something, and I want you to comment below. But please, be safe about it. What silent systems of control exist in your country today? What forms of violence are designed to leave no marks? What institutions document their own legitimacy while systematically destroying specific populations? I'm genuinely curious what patterns you recognize. And I think this conversation, this collective documentation, is how we prevent this from happening again. If this video made you think, made you angry, made you want to learn more, subscribe. Because next week, I'm diving into something the church spent centuries trying to erase: the medieval abortion underground, and why the church couldn't stop it. You're going to meet the women who kept medical knowledge alive, who built secret networks, who risked burning to preserve female autonomy. It's a story about resistance, and you're not going to want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and remember, history isn't just about the past. It's about recognizing the patterns before they repeat.